परब्रह्म समारम्भाम् श्री दत्तात्रेय मध्यमाम् श्री दत्त स्वामी पर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। सर्वविश्वन्यस्तपादपद्मायते वामहस्तालोलवेदशास्त्रायते ज्ञानसूर्यायते दत्तरूपायते श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम् श्रीवेणुगोपालकृष्णाय वन्दनम्। गुरुदत्त श्रीदत्त प्रभुदत्त पाहि माम् विधिदत्त हरिदत्त हरदत्त रक्ष माम् पाहि मां दत्ता रक्ष मां दत्ता। त्रैलोक्य गीता चैप्टर 12 कृष्ण तत्व ज्ञान योगः association with knowledge of philosophy of Krishna। त्रैलोक्य उवाच विवृणुत्वं पुनः प्रोक्तं दत्तपण्डित पामरेभ्यो विना तर्कं यदिदं सूक्ष्मवत्तमम्। Miss Trailokya asked, O God Datta, the scholar of scholars, can you please repeat the same topic in easy way of expression that can be grasped even by ordinary souls, filtering all the logical analysis? The reason is that this topic is very, very subtle.
Shri Datta Swami uvacha Trailokye karuna chitte pravrutti niyamah krutah tenatitena vinatah swakrutasya puraswayam. Shri Datta Swami spoke, O very kind-minded Trailokya, even though you have understood the topic explained in the previous chapter, you are very kind towards common people. God has written the rules of justice for the souls in pravrutti or worldly life. So justice can never be greater than God, because by following the path of justice, one can please the God, and this is the goal of this path of justice. Creator is always greater than created items and rules for them. So justice also comes under one of the created items. Moreover, God is the absolute reality, whereas creation is the relative reality, like imaginary world. Hence, the world and its rules can't bind God. But the author of rules follows the rules created by himself. Otherwise, the author is considered to be blind with ego and cannot stand as an example for others in following the rules. Dharmo adharmahara shreshtaha niyanta jiva nigraha vishwashantikaro jnana bhaktirdhehi vyakta karmacha. Justice has the highest place in the pravrutti. In pravrutti, nothing is above justice, so that soul can follow the rules of justice, by which injustice or sin, that is dushpravrutti, can be avoided. Justice is recommended for souls to put the control on the soul's sin or injustice. But when God comes into the picture, you can't insist on the same rules for him, because justice is to be followed by a soul so that it can be in its limits in behaving with other souls. By this, peace of the creation is maintained. Knowledge and love or devotion come under the theoretical part. The expression of the internal feelings in action comes under the practical part. Karmanupalamayate tasminnordhvanivruttaye ya jiveshwarayo svairam pravrittirbalavatama. For good action, good fruit is granted. For bad action, bad fruit is granted. For the same action, fruits can be different based on the direction of the action. When human incarnation of God comes into the picture in life, the matter goes above pravrutti, which is called nivrutti. Relationship between God and soul comes under nivrutti, which is completely the soul's choice. Pravrutti or worldly life is mandatory, whereas nivrutti or spiritual life is totally left to the choice of the soul. Bhakta Ramam striyo bhutva parirabdhumupagataha nivrutte srushti shaktyasya tesham kama vidurataha. Nivrutti was the relationship between Gopikas and God Krishna. Gopikas were illiterate in that birth, but they were the sages in their previous births who have understood and digested all the knowledge in the previous births and developed so much love for God, so that they wanted to embrace Lord Rama by becoming females using their superpower. God Krishna has no fascination for illegal sex with Gopikas, because Just by his one will, the heavenly dancers with topmost beauty will appear before him, standing in queue. If sex alone is his intention, he can create a female with unimaginable beauty. Why to enter into this controversial situation? Similarly, the sages, while doing severe penance, several heavenly dancers appeared, doing dance before them to attract their minds, but finally failed. Will they have hormonal based lust for the external beauty? They crossed this weakest life partner bond just to complete the full number of worldly bonds to get total salvation from all worldly bonds that are dropped due to love to God. Jnana-bhaktaः prema-kāmāः kāma-kāmāna chāgnayah Shivah Krishnah kāmadāhah Sutrājjānanti tamhitah. Their love or bhakti was generated based on true knowledge. Their attraction for Krishna was purely towards his divine, beautiful internal personality of qualities and not because of his beautiful body. So it was purely love-based lust. As sages, they already burned their lust in their penance fire. Krishna is Vishnu and Vishnu is Shiva. Hence Krishna is Shiva, who burnt Cupid, the deity of lust. Gopikas always knew that Krishna is God, which knowledge became love-based lust, and this is mentioned in the Bhakti Sutram written by sage Narada. Tatrapi na tadvihinam dharmyadharmyau prema kamau dvayoh kamontimah phale swarloka narakau proktaha taptasresho murarina. There are two types of love lust. 1. Justified love-based lust. 2. Unjust love-based lust. Former is based on knowledge of the good internal personality of legal husbands, good qualities resulting in lust, and the latter is generated simply by biological hormones, and also the resulting lust is diverted to illegal bonds. But the final action is lust, which is common in both justified love-based lust and unjust love-based lust. For good justified action, fruit is heaven, and for bad unjust action, fruit is hell. Krishna threatened and warned Gopikas that if they cheat their life partners, they will go to hell and they will have to hug the statue of same illegal person made with red hot metal copper, with whom they spent their night in illegal way. Virahoshmadhigam tasvat Krishnananda iti ritam sarvadhiko vrutas sarva bandhapatastamashridaha. Gopika's love for Krishna was so much that they said that they will get bliss by hugging the statue of Krishna, even if it is red hot, and told that they don't have any problem because the heat of separation from Krishna is more than the heat of the red hot statue. They accepted the punishment with full happiness to choose Krishna over everything and everybody. Complete surrender to God means 100% dropout of all worldly bonds for the sake of bond with God. Dareshana balehina parechinye bhavanti me kutolpetyatra sumahan tarko labhavadakshayaha. Among the worldly bonds, the three strongest bonds called Eshanas are with wealth, life partner, and issues. Gopikas, who were the sages, had crossed almost all the strong bonds except the weakest bond called Dareshana, bond with the life partner, which is the only bond having facility of divorce. Now, the question is, if all the strong bonds were crossed, why the weakest bond was kept in the final birth to be crossed? Even though it is the weakest bond, without crossing this, it will not be considered as complete surrender to God, which means drop out of all worldly bonds, including this weakest bond, due to the bond with God. If this weakest bond alone is crossed, before crossing other strong bonds, fruit can't be attained. It is always rational to cross strong test first and then pass the weak test at the end. However, unless all the tests are passed, the fruit is not achieved. If this weakest bond alone is crossed in the beginning, neither fruit is obtained, nor the hell ordained for crossing this weakest bond can be avoided, which means no use and extra loss. Crossing this weakest bond means sin of the illegal sex, since all other worldly bonds were not crossed. If this weakest bond is crossed, after all other bonds, total salvation is possible, by which crossing this weakest bond will not be a sin. Based on this complicated legal point, test of this weakest bond is arranged in the final female birth only. By putting this weakest test in the final birth, both good angles which are benefit total salvation and no loss, not going to hell by breaking bond with life partner, are achieved. For crossing other strong bonds in the beginning, sin is not achieved. But for crossing this weakest bond in the beginning, sin is achieved. At the end, crossing this weakest bond is justified, throwing away the sin, because without crossing this one weakest bond, total salvation from all worldly bonds becomes impossible. Hence, by putting this weakest test in the end, profit of total salvation is attained, and no sin for crossing this weakest bond is also simultaneously attained. In this way, lot of logic exists in arranging this weakest test in the final birth. Stridam klesho hyantyabandhe putrabandhe pyahantaya lingataya mokshavatya kritascharamanishchayah. The final birth is female birth, because crossing the bond with a life partner is more complicated for females than males. Along with this test, the other test, that is, test of wealth and issues, is also conducted, because the bond with issues is more strong for mother than with father, because mother bears the child in her womb for 9 months. The final birth is made as female birth, because the male gender ego will completely go if the final birth is of a female. In this final birth, not only all the worldly bonds can be crossed, but also the final trace of gender ego is also removed, so that the soul can attain full salvation from all worldly bonds, along with full salvation from total ego. The male can liberate himself from the acquired ego due to knowledge, wealth, etc., but can't attain total relief from the gender ego. But once the soul is born as female, male gender ego does not exist at all. All these reasons exist for a soul to have final female birth before getting total salvation from worldly bonds with reference to the attachment to God. Mere dropout of all worldly bonds is sheer waste and foolishness in the absence of bond with God. Mere salvation is useless without the bond with God. Rushinam janma pramanam vrajayoshitam na vidyapicha medhavi samanyopi sutarkavit. For the above point, that the final birth before getting full salvation shall be female birth, the best authority is the final birth of sages who were born as female gopikas. O Trailokya, don't worry about my logical analysis on this crucial point with a doubt that common people can't understand logic. The reason is that even though education is absent in the case of ordinary human beings, they are very wise and intelligent, following good logical analysis. And many a time, an uneducated wise person is far better than educated foolish person. Rahasyam yadabodhyam sat yadyasat nirayapradam yoga shastra vakragatehe nrutyamartha nishagatam. No one will understand the background of lustful acts between Krishna and Gopikas. That is why it had to be performed secretly so that world peace should not be disturbed through misunderstandings or misinterpreted exploitations resulting in misuse. Secrecy was maintained by Krishna since the dance at Vrindavanam was taking place from midnight to early morning till midnight to 4 a.m. so that the families of Gopikas were not disturbed with tension. Of course, if it is a worldly sin, secrecy doubles the punishment of the sin. Krishna is God and not an illegal human being. In this way, secrecy shall not be misunderstood as sin. The Gita says that the bond with God shall be always secret, so that families will not interfere in the spiritual path of the soul. Atmanam rahasi sthitaha rahasyam hyetaduttamam. Gita. In Yoga Shastra also, the curved serpentine movement of soul recommends the cunning path in the devotion, so that devotion to God can progress without the notice of the worldly bonds, which is not a sin at all. But this will be terrible sin if the goal is not God and is some other illegal worldly bond. Shankara deceived his old mother for the sake of God's service, getting inspiration from gopikas. सदप्यसदिव व्यक्तं गृहीताखिलदण्डनात् सर्वकोणैः स देवोऽपि दण्डस्वप्रेमदर्शने. Even though the act of gopikas was completely right, still Krishna took not only the punishment of the present sin, but also punishments of all their previous sins also on himself, so that ordinary souls will fear to imitate Krishna and gopikas, deciding that whatever happened between them was certainly a sin, even though Krishna was God. He did not cancel their sins, even though he has such a power. He also lifted a huge hill on his little finger to prove his divinity, so that ordinary human beings will not exploit whatever he did with gopikas without proving their divinity. Of course, mere miracle can't prove the divinity, since the demon Ravana also lifted even bigger Kailasa mountain. Apart from miracles, preaching excellent spiritual knowledge through the Gita and unimaginable love to devotees by creating Goloka for gopikas even above his abode are to be taken as the other identity marks for confirmation. Hence, Krishna was proved as the ultimate God from all angles. He was so overwhelmed by seeing Gopika's pure love, so that instead of cancelling the sins, he took the punishments of sins on himself to express his love and pleasure towards gopikas. Similarly, killing the sinful Vali without exposure was not a sin, but God Rama treated it as sin and underwent its punishment in the next birth, so that nobody will exploit his action, which means that everybody will kill his enemy from behind, charging him as sinner. Angikarat phalanyasaha vidyate shastra gocharaha angishakto चक्रर्महाबाधाः virodhaditi tadgiraha. There is a clause which he had provided in the constitution of worldly life, which is that even though action is done by one soul, other soul can get the fruit of the action by mutual agreement. When a person becomes sick and is unable to perform the ritual of worship to God, Sandhya Vandanam, he can request other friendly person to do the same on his behalf and get its fruit through mutual consent. It is also said in ethics that half of the fruit of worship done by the husband goes to wife, and this supports the concept of transfer of fruit of the deed done by one to the other. Of course, in this case, it is the transfer of fruit of the wife to the husband. The Veda says that every soul is female and wife of God. Striyas sateh pumsaha. By this way, Krishna can transfer the punishments of sins of gopikas to himself. Transfer from wife to husband with the consent of gopikas. But in this case, gopikas did not agree for God Krishna to suffer all their sins. Even though Krishna kept this as secret in his mind, Krishna simply told that he will relieve gopikas from their sins. Aham tva sarva papebhyah Gita. Gopikas, that is sages, knew this point through their superpower and objected Krishna. Then Krishna told them that he is suffering their sins with a lot of pleasure as basis and not with pain. He also told them that if they object, he will suffer with pain more than the pain in suffering for their sins. Due to this, Gopikas agreed for transfer of their sins to Krishna. Golokena pratiprema dharmatita nirupane bindum prativardhimardhe sruptah papa phalagrahat. God never violated any rules. God has created rules of justice, and so God is above justice. This was one of the ways of practical proof by which Gopikas proved by going against justice and voting for Krishna above everything and everybody, including justice. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Gita. If they can show this much love for God Will God be silent without reacting to their love? Soul's love for God is just a drop of the entire ocean. But even a drop of God's love contains millions of oceans. So, what to talk about the entire ocean of His love? It is beyond even imagination. No mind can ever understand and imagine His love. He proved His love by creating Goloka above Brahmaloka for them. This was not enough for Him. So, He took the punishment of Gopikas on Himself and underwent full punishment for their sins also without letting them know about it. He took care so that they should not feel pain for His transferred suffering. So He hid it completely. This is how He expressed His extreme love for Gopikas. He never even considered those punishments as punishments. He always considered those punishments as enjoyment and pleasure in responding to their highest love. His extreme love is seen here when He goes one more step further and says that if anyone stops Him or objects Him for bearing or enjoying the punishments by himself, they will incur sin, because by doing so they are obstructing His pleasure in suffering for their sins and leading Him to terrible pain caused by not allowing Him to suffer for their sins with pleasure. No soul can ever imagine God's love. No soul can match God's love ever. Aneka janma samskaro muninam prekshaniyakam yadinaschet vijanimaha yadhavarnastatha jagat. The final female birth of sages born as Gopikas, as described in the most holy scripture called the Bhagavatam, is the reference in the light of which we are analyzing the issue of tests of three strongest worldly bonds in comparison with the strength of their bond with God. Before this birth, millions of births of the sages have gone, in which those sages did continuous severe penance for God, due to which almost all worldly bonds were burnt, along with the lust caused by hormonal activity in their penance fire. We must keep the entire background of these sages in our eyes, and then only see the situation of their final birth as Gopikas. then only we can understand the background of their behavior towards God shown in their final birth. We are not viewing in this light of their very long background. We are viewing their situation in their final birth in the light of our background, which is that we are always soaked in the mud pond of all the worldly bonds without exception of even a single worldly bond. With this light of background, can we understand this situation of the Bhagavatam? The background present in our mind is like the spectacle on our eyes with a specific color. If the spectacle lenses are red, we will see red world. If the color of spectacle lenses is blue, we will see the blue world. Anityah kalpito bandhah vibhinnaschalachitrayoh seva bandhasthirah satyah janakaya niveditah. Sages have realized that all these worldly bonds are temporary and hence unreal, like the bonds among the roles of various actors in different cinemas. Two actors in an old cinema acted as husband and wife, and the same two actors are acting as son and mother in another new movie because shortly the heroine becomes old. This cinema bond existed neither before nor after shooting of cinema. Hence such a bond is temporary, which is thought to exist in the time of the shooting. If we analyze sharply, this cinema bond was also not true during the time of cinema shooting. Hence, Shankara told that anything temporary is unreal. Anityam krutakam hi loke. The bond between these two actors is only co-actor bond, which is unreal. Similarly, any worldly bond between two souls is unreal, which exists in this birth only. Hence the bond in this birth is also unreal. Sages told King Janaka that the mother of previous birth becomes wife in this birth due to her fascination for the body that was grown up by her. In cinema, the truth of bonds between two roles, and in this world cinema, bonds between two souls were bond with issues, putreshana, and bond with life partner, dareshana. The bond with money becomes alive only when living worldly bonds exist. The bond between God and souls is like the bond between producer and actors, which alone is permanent. Hence, The final message is that all unreal worldly bonds must be dropped with reference to the only real bond of the soul with God. Evam jnanat sabam tyaktam tasmai pato nigruhyadam moshikair gehadahakyam parikshaskhalitairnakim. What sages did with reference to God was quite expected because they rejected all worldly bonds, including bond with justice and bond with fear for hell, for the sake of bond with God. Such a climax stage of nivrutti or spiritual life is called as Mahanivrutti. In the place of bond with God, if an illegal bond exists, this Mahanivrutti will become Duspravrutti, and the fall is from first topmost world called Brahmaloka to the last bottommost world called Patalaloka. This is the only fear in this most holy concept. In between these two extreme places, pravrutti exists above duspravrutti, and nivrutti exists below mahanivrutti. The fear is that some fraud human incarnation may exploit this concept, cheating an innocent devotee. The exploitation shall be always resisted by all means of precautions, but for the sake of avoiding this exploitation, we shall not cut the root by saying that this genuine concept is also fraud. We will not burn the house due to rats, and we will remove the rats with the help of rat catching boxes or pads. We will not abolish the examination system on finding copying in some center. Instead, we will take all steps to avoid copying. Sankalpena phalam bhunkte najadena hi karmana drustam yasena bhaktabhyam phalayoh krutakarmanoh. The intention is totally responsible in enjoying the fruit of the deed. The deed is inert and can't be the cause of the fruit. The intention is a mode of awareness and becomes the cause of the fruit. This concept can be explained with the help of two examples. 1. Sage Vyasa did sex with the two wives of his younger brother on his death in order to extend the race as per the order of his mother, and such sex was not considered as sin, instead was considered as merit. Number 2. Two devotees travelled to Kashi city. On the way, one stopped the journey since he fell in love with a prostitute. The second one reached Kashi and was worshipping God Shiva every day. On the day of Shivaratri, the first one died while embracing the naked prostitute, whereas the other died while doing bath worship to God Shiva. God Shiva ordered his servants to bring the person died lying with the prostitute and ordered servants of death to take the devotee died in Kashi to the hell. The reason given by God Shiva was the first one was always thinking about the fortunate worship of the second fellow throughout his life. The second one was always thinking the fortunate sex of the first one with the prostitute. The fruits are as per the intention and thinking of mind and not as per their inert actions. Karmanya karma gitetu karmano na phalam shrutam gopika madhumatyoscha drishtantabhyam subodhitam. There is a verse in Gita which states that a scholar shall find inaction in the action and action in the inaction. Karmanya karmayah pasyet. The real meaning of this verse is that you shall find, number one, absence of sin in a sinful deed due to the presence of meritorious intention in it. And second, absence of merit in a meritorious deed due to presence of sinful intention in it. Hence, whether a deed is sinful or meritorious is decided not by the nature of the deed, but by the nature of the intention. This concept can be applied to two cases. One, Madhumati was mad of sex with her husband, God Datta, in all the times, including times of worship also. It is legal sex, and Madhumati was simply attracted by the external physical beauty of her husband without recognizing him as the ultimate God and his inner topmost beautiful personality of divine qualities. The fruit of this legal sex with legal husband was curse from God Dattatreya to Madhumati to become demon. 2. Gopikas also were mad of sex with Krishna, but the basis of such lust is not hormonal based love for the external beauty of Krishna. Instead, the basis of such a lust is the pure love for God developed in millions of past births through severe penance. Sage Narada tells that Gopikas were well aware of Krishna as God during their midnight dance with Krishna. This is illegal sex with illegal Krishna, and the result is Goloka, which is above the abode of God. In both these cases, the nature of the fruit is decided by the background feelings of mind and not by the nature of common inert action, which is the same lust. It is very interesting to note that both Dattatreya and Krishna are the two human incarnations of the first energetic incarnation called God Datta. The homogeneity of the concept in both cases is due to this important point. Iti Trailokya Gītāyam Krishna Tattva Jnana Yogo Nama Dvadashadhyayah. Like this, in Trailokya Gita, the 12th chapter called Association with Knowledge of a Philosophy of Krishna is completed.
Udvegarahita Santosharahita Shanti Samudra Shri Datta Shanti Samudra Shri Datta Shanti Samudra Shri Datta Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi.
Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that propagating divine spiritual knowledge pleases the Lord greatly. Jnana yajnena tenaham ishtasyamiti me matihi. Spiritual knowledge brings about permanent peace and harmony in the world. So join us in sharing this divine knowledge of Lord Datta and earn the highest grace of God. For more spiritual videos, visit our YouTube channel, Shri Datta Swami. For more discourses on true spiritual knowledge, visit the website www.universal-spirituality.org.